Well, I think we will go to Brian Hartline with a new assignment as he is fully integrated into his spot with some help from the new offensive line coach.
And he's Ryan Day is Ryan Day keeps saying like Brian Hartline's going to be the best coordinator in the nation, and he's ready to be calling plays, and because he's been on the headsets the entire time, he gives feedback these past 3 years, and so he's confident there. And with Hartline, he's still getting questions. He's still going to be around the receivers, like he's still going to be very involved there. There is still a question of whether he's going to be upstairs or downstairs for the actual on field during the games. Where are you calling plays from? So they still have to figure that out. Chip Kelly always liked being on the field because one, he was like the head coach, so he had to be. But he was upstairs last year in the press box calling plays. That was the first time he'd been upstairs calling plays since he was an offensive coordinator for at Oregon way back when. So where will Brian Hartline be? And if he is upstairs, and you've got Devin Jordan downstairs working with the receivers on the sideline, so that's all yet to be decided. Is fellow coaches on the offensive side, speak very highly of Hartline and his the way he works and his understanding of the offense and his creativity. So this is another one where you get some new eyes on things, and he's been around some good coaches, and so he's learned. You've been around Urban Meyer, you've been around Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Like those are all good offensive minds, great offensive minds. So you're going to pick up some good things. And so the expectations are pretty good. Now he's still dealing with a brand new quarterback. So, he can be a great offensive mind, but you can only do what the offense can do with the skill that you've got. And I think there's plenty of talent, but it's still going to be a first time starting quarterback. So what it looks like in August or September, it's going to look better in November and December. It's just, there may be some growing pains in there.
Yeah, I look at it, and he's going to be a guy juggling a lot of things. He's got the wide receiver group, although he's got former Ohio State player Devin Jordan, who helps him out quite a bit with coaching the wide receivers. He's got the play calling, the wide receivers, putting the game plans together, working with the staff. He admits this will be much different than it was 2 years ago when Ryan Day was still calling the plays. Now it's on Brian Hartline to have those in-game responsibilities. He was asked about Jeremiah Smith, the great year he had, what they can do to have his second year be better than his first year. And it's a challenge, I think, for all involved, particularly with a new quarterback and a new offensive coordinator and, different people in different roles. Is Jeremiah Smith going to produce at the same level that he did this past year? A couple of the up-and-coming guys, Brandon Ennis has kind of scratched the surface the last couple of years at wide receiver, what he can do, hoping to get more production out of him, and maybe he'll lock down that job that Emeka Egbuka had as a wide receiver. And Mylan Graham, a big-timer in the 2024 class, national top 50 prospect out of Fort Wayne, Indiana area, New Haven High School, I believe, over there. He redshirted this past year, and now he'll get a chance as well to kind of crack that top 3 or 4 wide receiver rotation. So he's got a lot of irons in the fire there, Mr. Hartline does, but it sounds like he is ready to accept this challenge. You think about it, they drafted him, back in, 2018 when everything went sideways with Zach Smith and Urban Meyer. He was upgraded from a program assistant to a full-time wide receivers coach, and he took to it like a duck to water, basically. And they've had one great wide receiver group out after another. And now, you lose a guy like Egbuka, you got to replace him. And you got to help Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith reach their next step in their development as well. So this guy's got a lot going on this year, the most responsibility he's ever really been handed as an assistant coach, and only in his whatever that would be, 18 to 25, 6th, 7th, 8th year, whatever this is. And he's still learning the job as he goes. So we'll see. Obviously, how that goes this coming year.
Well, and even before 18, when he came in at the end of the 2016 season to work scout team wide receiver in preparation for the bowl game against Clemson, and then was just a volunteer intern type the following year in 2017. Like the rise from the way he started, to go from scholarship receiver to NFL receiver to retired NFL receiver to scout team Ohio State receiver again in 2016 for the bowl game, and then just continue to make the rise. And again, this was something that Ohio State needed to do if they wanted to keep him, but also something that clearly Ryan Day wanted to do, not just to keep him, but because he believes in him, because they want to keep this thing going, and Ryan Day is not going to do something that he thinks is going to work the opposite of that. With Billy Fessler, I talked to him quite a bit as well, and I just mentioned that Brian Hartline grew up with all of these great offensive coaches. Billy Fessler has been in coaching for about 6 years or so, 6-7 years, and like his coaches have been Joe Moorhead, who is, I think, a fantastic college offensive mind, Ryan Day and Chip Kelly. Like, these are the guys that he's learned from offensive football. And talking to Keenan Bailey about Billy Fessler, and he's like, his mind, like during COVID, they roomed together. And then when the season shut down, it was basically just all they did was what I think they called it like football school. And they just spent all day talking about football. And he's like, I learned way more from Billy Fessler than he ever learned from me. And Will Howard said it recently, that if Billy Fessler wouldn't have gotten the job, he would have had words with Ryan Day, semi-jokingly. But Will Howard talked about Billy Fessler, like every game week, those two would go take a walk and talk about all of the scenarios that Will Howard could run into and what he needs to do, and how he would need to operate with all of these variables. And so, again, like I said earlier, Billy Fessler coaches quarterbacks like Ryan Day wants them coached. So he seems to be a pretty bright star. I think one of the interesting things that's going to happen in a couple of years, where you've got this former Penn State quarterback and Billy Fessler, who's a rising star. You've got a former Ohio State quarterback, JT Barrett, who's a rising star in the coaching ranks. What happens if JT Barrett ends up at Penn State? And what happens, you got Billy Fessler still at Ohio State. At some point, will they make a trade for each other so that they can each come back home with these two coveted offensive minds? And then the glass breaks, and by God, that's Kenny Guyton's music. And now what happens? Who is also back to coaching quarterbacks in college football. So a lot of it just young coaches was a theme of the day for the Ohio State staff as well. When you look at what Tyler Bowen is 35, Keenan Bailey, I'm not even sure if he's 30 yet. Billy Fessler is in his 20s. Like a very, very, very young staff overall. And so it's one that can grow and relate to the young players, as the olds would say. All 10 assistants and the head coach. So
yeah, I guess that makes sense. Okay. All right, Steve, we'll pick off your next favorite or most intriguing. Don't want to hold you guys down to anything in particular.
I listened in on Larry Johnson quite a bit. I wrote a story about Larry Johnson, and he discussed CJ Hicks moving to defensive end. Now he is, I wrote, you say this, only 240 pounds. So, how much weight is he going to pack on? How exactly is he going to go about, rushing the passer and being an impact defensive end? Obviously, they've got Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson, who Larry Johnson is hoping that those guys will take the next step. And, you'd say replace JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer in some way in terms of production. But, that'll be hard to do. Obviously, those guys were outstanding, particularly in the last 6 or 7 games of the season. They just dominated a lot of the opponents that they played. So we'll see how that all shakes out. But him talking about CJ Hicks was very good. He talked about a couple of the younger guys, Jason Moore and also Will Smith. Will Smith just under 300 pounds. And Jason Moore is right around 300 pounds. There are third-year sophomores whose time has kind of come. I mean, those guys need to push Caden McDonald, whoever is going to start there at the defensive tackle, and really kind of push those guys and get their way into the 2 deep at this point. So we'll see how that all kind of comes around in the wash. And then, of course, he was also asked, was there any veracity to all the rumors and innuendo that was out there for the last couple of years that there was a rift between himself and Jim Knowles as the defensive coordinator. And he did everything he could to kind of debunk that myth. And obviously it would look bad on Larry Johnson if he were to say, yeah, I hated that bleep bleep because he wanted to do this. He wanted to play that jack defensive end or whatever that was, and wanted to do this and wanted to do that with the scheme. And, here's Larry would have, figured he was the underling. He needed to take his marching orders from Jim Knowles. And so he said, no, we just had some different philosophies and we worked together and kumbaya, and it was all good. So, that was kind of the upshot of that.
And of course, we've got an addition at the running back spot with Carlos Lachlan. So how is he sizing up the running back competition?
Well, I think he's all in on James Peoples, for one, and could not speak highly enough about him. He's taking a leadership role, even with CJ Donaldson coming in from West Virginia. He said Donaldson's down to about 230 from 238. They wanted him to lose some weight to get him faster and quicker. He also mentioned Bo Jackson's up to about 220 right now. So if you want to buy stock, do it in James Peoples and Bo Jackson. And Carlos Lachlan is always going to be confident in his room. He's always going to talk about how well he's going to get them prepared. And based on his first year last year, I don't know how you can argue against that, because sure, they had some very talented running backs in Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, but those guys stepped up and they produced, and they protected the ball. I think Judkins had one fumble in the Oregon game, the first Oregon game. They protected the quarterback. They caught the ball. They were all well-rounded. And so you're losing 7,500 career rushing yards from those two guys, and you're going to have to replace them with a transfer and, some guys that haven't yet done it. But the confidence in James Peoples right now, that the expectations and the confidence that the coaches and teammates have in James Peoples right now, I don't really have a ton of doubts about the running backs.
Yeah, I agree. I think that there were a lot of positive things said about James Peoples. Carlos Lachlan said he's not just going to hand him the job, however, that he's got to go out this spring and earn it. And I think it does help to have a veteran like CJ Donaldson, who's also there to kind of bridge the gap. So I think you got a lot of positive things going on there. Sam Williams-Dixon obviously considered a transfer, was in the portal for a brief time and decided to rescind that and came back to Ohio State. Probably some assurances from Carlos Lachlan that he'll get a fair shot at some playing time this year after redshirting this past year. And so you've got several guys there that really are going to push. And we'll see this spring if anybody can take hold of that job. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Peoples has probably the highest upside of everybody, but again, don't count anybody out in this race. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch this spring and see who can make the most plays at that position. As Tony said, it's more than just running the football; it's also pass protection. And it's also catching the ball out of the backfield, which will be so critical with a young quarterback to have somebody coming out of the backfield that you can dump it off to and get a quick 5-6 yards on first down. If that's what you're left with, make a positive play out of nothing a lot of times with those passes to the running back. So I'm interested and excited to see how those guys come along.
Yeah, and as Lisa said, that he wants his top 4 or 5 guys involved in special teams. If you can't get involved in special teams, then how can I trust you to play? And that's that was something that Jim Tressel, Urban Meyer, that's football 101 basically. Like if I can't trust you on special teams, how can I trust to hand you the ball? So whether that's kickoff coverage or whatever, punt protection, the thing that Ohio State always shows to all of these young guys when they're talking about special teams is Ezekiel Elliott as a true freshman running down the field and covering kicks. and Terry McLaurin as a punt gunner. Like they they put their best players out there. Chris Olave would do it as well. So it's like nobody is above playing on special teams because it's very, very important to programs that take it seriously.
No doubt. No doubt.